to order. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So, welcome to this meeting. Would you please call the roll, Mr. Wolf?
Sure. Start with Commissioner Bundy.
Here.
Commissioner Bendel.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
Commissioner Chase.
Here.
And our newest commissioner, who was took the oath of office this morning and was appointed last week by the town council, Commissioner Rizzo.
Here.
Okay, fabulous. So at this point, Tracy, you're running the comment line, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So at this point in the meeting, we open the meeting to public comment for anything which is not on tonight's agenda. Do you have any such public comment?
I will check. I am going to check for raised hands from attendees first. I see a raised hand from Fred Casisa. Fred, I'm going to unmute you and lower your hand.
That was an
Go
error.
ahead, Fred.
It was an error. Sorry.
Okay. Nice to speak to you. I'm going to mute you again.
Tracy, can I make a comment real fast?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is Rebecca, the town clerk. I just wanted to let you know we had some technological difficulties and accidentally started the meeting broadcast before 7 o'clock while we worked out some problems. This happened at a meeting 2 weeks ago. And when that happened, the attendees couldn't see the commissioner videos. They show up as paused. At that meeting, it was the fire council and police council meeting. The attendees had no problem seeing the presentations that were being shared. So we didn't actually figure out what caused that, so I don't know how to fix that right now. I can tell you that when the video processes after the meeting, the commissioners' videos will all be visible along with the presentations. So I think it's fine to go forward with the meeting. Just know that I think that your webcam videos won't be visible to the public, but I'm going to log on as an attendee and see if that changes. The other option would be to end the meeting and restart it and have everyone rejoin, which is a lot more difficult to manage.
Yeah, Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind, that would be helpful if you could just confirm for us what you can see as an attendee.
I'm on as an attendee, and I see paused videos, and I see the shared screen with the agenda. I don't see your faces, but I can see the materials. We have additional raised hands if you'd like me to continue.
For the comment for that which is not on tonight's agenda, yes.
Lucinda Smith, I can see you have a raised hand. I'm going to unmute you so you can speak.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lucinda.
I wanted to confirm that that's all I see are pause for each one of the commissioners' little spaces, and then we do see the town commissioner agenda. So
Thank you.
confirm that. Thank you.
I'm going to mute you again, Lucinda. Checking for more public comment. I see Fred's hand is raised. I'm not sure if he has additional comment. I'm going to check. Fred, you're self-muted. If you want to make a comment, you'll have to unmute. I'm guessing he doesn't have one. I'm going to go ahead and lower his hand. And I think that's it for our attendees. I'll go ahead
Okay.
and check public comment email now. And I don't see any comment there for open time.
Great. Okay, well, at this point then, we will close the open time. And we have nothing on the consent calendar tonight. So we will go directly to our new hearing. So tonight we have two items. Item A is the hotel floor area bonus ordinance. I'm going to ask anyone who's not speaking to mute their microphone if it's at all possible. Thank you. Tonight, the hotel floor area bonus ordinance is consideration and possible action by the Planning Commission regarding a recommendation to the Town Council to, 1, approve an initial study mitigated negative declaration pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, and 2, adopt a zoning ordinance amendment to chapters 18.12 commercial districts and 18.13 mixed-use districts to permit hotel uses in the C4 zoning district as conditional use and modify the permitted floor area ratio, FAR, and the height for hotel uses in C3, C4, and MX zoning districts through the creation of a floor area bonus. All right, that's a mouthful. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Chairman Chase and commissioners. This is an item that should look, first off, thanks, Tracy. I see you got the presentation up there on the screen, so hopefully everybody in the public can see that. But this is an item that should be familiar to at least four of you on the commission. And then obviously we have new Commissioner Jim Rizzo, who has not been involved in this ordinance, but this is an ordinance that came before you about a year ago. Very similar. There are a couple of significant changes that I will talk about, but for the vast majority of the ordinance, it is substantially the same as what came before the commission last April. And so what I'd like to do is, for the benefit of given basically almost a year or a little bit more than a year has passed, just do an overview of the ordinance again, and then answer any questions you may have. And you can see that there are a couple of options before you in your staff report. And all of this is outlined in the staff report for this item, so I'll follow along with that. Next slide. Thank you. So just by way of background, I mentioned this before, but this is an ordinance that really was a product of a discussion with the town council all the way back in 2018, really following on the heels of the process related to the Corte Madera Inn hotel project, which, as you know, has been discontinued and is no longer an active project. So with that said, there was a discussion with the council who gave some direction to staff to propose an ordinance and vet it through the Planning Commission that would incentivize hotel development through the creation of a bonus or an incentive program. And we talked through that staff report and through that discussion with the town council about the existing regulations for hotels in town, the fact that they were fairly or very low compared to other jurisdictions in Marin at 0.34 FAR, and that hotels were important uses and were important to the long-term as a long-term amenity for community residents, but also obviously for economic reasons as well. So what followed was several meetings with the Planning Commission, both in July and November of 2018, where we started with a framework of an ordinance, and the commission commented, and we made modifications as staff to that ordinance and the framework, ultimately arriving at last April, where we presented a draft zoning ordinance amendment to the Planning Commission. That was actually approved by the Planning Commission, or recommended. It was a resolution that recommended, that the Town Council approve the zoning ordinance amendment, and was then forwarded on to the Town Council. But prior to the hearing, we discussed, and we had public comment regarding the need for additional environmental analysis. So essentially, with that public comment, we went back to the council and discussed what the right way to proceed would be. And since last August, you can see that's the meeting on August 20th, 2020, we had that discussion and meeting with the Town Council and received direction from the council to proceed with environmental analyses. And that, as you can see, has taken a good part of the last year, and has resulted in the initial study, mitigated negative declaration, which has been prepared by Placeworks, which is an environmental consulting firm that we hired to perform the appropriate analysis pursuant to CEQA. And Steve Nowak, who is our environmental consultant, is also on this. He's a panelist this evening, and if you have questions, you can discuss that with him or ask those to him at the appropriate time. So with that sort of just going back, and sorry, all those staff reports and whatnot are attached to the staff report. I believe that's the wrong attachment, though. It's actually attachment 4 to your staff report has meeting minutes from the August 20th, 2020 Town Council meeting, which in that staff report had a bunch of the other staff reports for the other meetings. Next. So just from a high level overview of what the ordinance entails, or what's in the ordinance.
Did not advance, Adam?
Excuse me, sorry.
Did it not advance the slide?
Yeah, no, it hasn't advanced the slide still.
There we go.
There we go, thank you.
Okay, yep.
So these are this is just an overview. There's a lot in the ordinance, but essentially just to go over, it permits hotels in the C4 zoning district as a conditional use. And I'll show you where that is in town. And then within the C3, C4, and MX zoning districts, it would permit the floor area bonus on sites greater than 1 acre in size. Applicants, there were provisions put in the ordinance that would require not only a preliminary hearing in front of the Planning Commission, but even before that, a community meeting to discuss at the earliest possible stages a potential or proposal for a hotel under this ordinance. And then significantly, we talked, and this came out of our meetings with the Planning Commission, there would be these enhanced findings that the Planning Commission would be required to make with respect to design and aesthetics, very importantly, environmental sustainability, community integration, how the project integrates into the community or provides community benefits, and enhancements to the public realm, meaning the streets and sidewalks in the area around a proposed hotel project. Down there, the fifth bullet, it would allow up to 0.70 FAR allowed, up from the current 0.34 FAR, and that there was a scoring system also developed in the ordinance itself that sort of described how points or FAR would be allocated to each of the enhanced findings that I just described. And then this is something that is new from last year. A component was to add up a height allowance or a bonus up to 47 feet in height where currently it's 35 feet max in C3 and C4 districts and 40 feet in MX1 districts. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So just for starters, I mentioned that the zoning ordinance would permit hotel uses in the C4 zoning district as a conditional use. Hotel uses are not allowed as a conditional use or permitted use in the C4 district. And that's essentially this area to the east of Highway 101 between San Clemente Drive and Paradise Drive, which currently has a variety and a mix of uses, everything from the car dealerships at the northern portion of that area to the Herc rentals at the southern area, southern portion of the area, and in between some other businesses and the San Clemente Place apartment complex. So a variety of uses there. So that's the area where hotels would be permitted. Next. And then this is the area in general where the hotel bonus ordinance or floor area bonus ordinance would be basically eligible for use. And you can see these are in the brown are the C3 districts. The pink, which I just talked about, was the C4 district. And then the greenish is the MX1 district, sort of in the middle between Tamalpais Drive and Warnham Drive in that center section where the current two hotels, larger hotels in town currently exist. Next slide. As part of the bonus ordinance or this ordinance, there are several conditions that I'd like to walk through. So one is to be eligible to use this bonus. You'd have to have a lot of at least 1 acre in size. So that, for example, we saw the budget in, which is less than 1 acre, would not be eligible for this bonus. And in fact, they are using the current existing 0.34 FAR to rebuild that into a hotel at a smaller size. At least we're expecting to see them move forward relatively soon on that site. A couple other, and these are additionally new provisions that you haven't seen since last April, but a couple of provisions. One, that no more than 4 bonuses in total could be granted in town in terms of 4 different hotel projects. That would be the maximum. And just a little bit of background on that, that in a sense caps the total amount of development that could be developed under this ordinance, and was needed, or we did this as in part because it simplified the environmental analysis as well. So that was one of the things as you go through the environmental analysis and start thinking about what needs to be assessed and analyzed. This was one of the provisions that made its way back into the ordinance, which caps the total amount of development. And then secondly, no more than 2 bonuses could be granted in each hotel bonus area. And the next slide will actually go through this, but essentially that is a provision that avoids, or is intended to avoid, clustering or all of the bonuses being granted in one particular area in town, in that it would essentially act as a anti-clustering provision, which was something that was discussed in our meetings with the town council. Next slide. So this is a map that just shows those lots in the eligible areas that are over 1 acre in size, at least currently. And just note, this is a point in time, so this doesn't mean that in the future sites couldn't be assembled to create lots larger than 1 acre. But this is just an attempt to show you at least currently what the eligible lots are and which ones would meet that provision. or that condition of the zoning ordinance. Next slide. And these are the hotel bonus areas that I spoke of. So no more than 2 bonuses could be granted in each of these hotel bonus areas. And that does not mean that you can exceed 4 total bonuses granted in town at all. It just means that if you are going to grant up to 4, they have to be no more than 2 in each area. Next slide. Some additional conditions that are in the ordinance are that, and we talked about these already, but just to mention the first one, we did, this is carried over from April of last year. Hotels would be required to meet the residential standards for flood, for meeting basically flood construction or design in flood. Sorry, let me rephrase this. Hotels would be required to meet the residential requirements for flood proofing. And that is something that was in question a couple years ago, but this will make it very clear that basically the finished floor elevation of any occupiable units, hotel rooms, would have to be above, currently that would be 11 NAVD in terms of its elevation. Again, these are the other community meetings, sort of go to speak to the process that's required. Next slide. And then importantly, the findings, and these are the enhanced findings that we talked about last year. But essentially, all 4 findings would need to be met in order to grant any additional FAR above 0.34. And the additional FAR would be granted pursuant to a schedule or an FAR assignment schedule, which would basically grant additional FAR up to 0.12 maximum for meeting the architecture and design finding. Again, 0.12 maximum for meeting the environmental sustainability finding. And the other 2, as you can see, 0.06 for the other 2. Just this was a way to try to give relatively greater significance or importance to the top 2 findings. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to go through these. These are in the ordinance themselves, copied directly from the ordinance, but these are the actual findings that would have to be made. And I think importantly, given some of the public comment that we received, finding number 2 does talk about specifically respecting and exhibiting natural systems and features through building, siting, programming, and orientation. And that was really an attempt to try to learn from some of the past discussions we had regarding siting hotels in proximity to maybe sensitive natural features or other environmental features on a project site. So next slide. These are the other findings that I just discussed, and this is the language. And as you can see in these findings, which is different than the first finding about design and aesthetics, these findings actually more clearly discuss that the finding will be made by the commission if it is assigned floor area under the floor area assignment schedule, which is actually in the next slides. And so you can see, go ahead, Tracy, and you can go to the next slide. You can see that this is how under environmental sustainability, you can get up to a maximum of 12 points. And this is how you can get up to those 12 points essentially. And if you are granted even as little as 2 points here, though, that would mean that the finding would be met for that particular category, environmental sustainability. For example, that's pretty clear. Next slide, please. This is the community integration finding on the left-hand side, and you can see that that's how it's labeled. But these are meant to be examples of how a project could achieve additional FAR under the community integration finding with a maximum of 6 points, or which equates to 0.06 FAR. Next slide, please. And this hasn't changed from last year at all. It has been sort of reorganized a little bit in terms of its language, but that's it, not substantively. And this is public realm and examples of how you could achieve up to 3 maximum for pedestrian improvements in the public realm and 3 in bicycle improvements in the public realm. Next slide. And just to talk a little bit about the findings for the ordinance, this is in the resolution. You will see, a lot of this hotel uses, and specifically all of these areas that we're talking about being eligible for the hotel FAR bonus are located in this mixed use commercial land use designation, which really is intended to allow for a wide variety of uses. You can see that there is a specific provision that FAR could be increased if allowed pursuant to applicable zoning district regulations. So there's consistency there with the mixed use commercial land use designation. Sorry, next slide, please. And that's just the map that's showing again, the eligible areas, and that those are all this light blue color, which is the mixed use commercial land use designation in the general plan. And then there's other significant policies that also speak to economic development. And next slide, I'll speak to them on the next slide, Tracy. Policy LU 3.3, which talk about infill floor area, considering policies basically and zoning ordinance amendments to allow bonuses to the maximum floor area ratios for infill development that comply with general plan infill policies. LU 5.2, I think, specifically talks about zoning ordinance amendments. This is more promote economic development through flexible development standards, talks about flexible development standards, reduced on-site shared parking, increased building heights, etc. And so this is following some of those that guidance in the general plan. And with respect to a couple, so I talked, I think, enough through the reasons, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of this, of course, but in terms of the height, this was primarily as we took a closer look at the 0.70 FAR, and as you get into maybe some of the higher ranges of the FARs, closer to 0.7, if we had a proposal for that, given the fact that we want to see other aspects of the site used for and given over to whether it's community uses such as a plaza, a public plaza, or park, that there's sensitivity with respect to how the site plan works, with respect to natural resources or other maybe constraints on a particular site that should be avoided or moved away from. The additional height, I think, is an important it allows it some additional flexibility, I would say, and it's consistent. As I read through again some of the land use policies, that may be helpful in sort of achieving the site plans that the commission may want to see. And it's completely discretionary. It's up to a certain height. And also the other reason was looking at actually some of the existing heights in some of these areas that are eligible for this hotel floor area bonus. You have several other sites that have heights well above the existing maximum allowed, which is 35 feet again in C3 and C4 districts. and up to 40 feet with Planning Commission approval in the MX1 district. So, you know, the theater in the MX1 district is 40 feet currently, approximately. You have several of the areas obviously in the shopping centers, both town center and the village, that have heights that exceed, are up to approximately 47 feet. And of course, the office building is on town center is well above that, up about 60 feet. In the C4 district, you have the San Clemente Place Apartments, which is approximately 40 feet, but it's actually graded up quite a bit from the street. So it's perceived a little bit higher than that from the street. And so there are heights in this range, and I think combined with the potential flexibility that may be needed on a given site, staff felt it was important to at least consider that, and is proposing that at this time. So next slide. And so then getting back to the environmental analysis, which I mentioned earlier, that was prepared. Initial study mitigated neg deck was prepared, as I mentioned, by Placeworks, the contract with the town. There were potentially significant impacts identified in air quality, biology, greenhouse gases, and noise, and those mitigation measures were proposed for those categories and are documented in the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which is attachment 7 to your staff report. As you know, we did just receive public comment today, one late yesterday evening, and one which the comment period ran from April 25th to May 25th. So there's a 30-day required public comment period. We received one yesterday on May 25th and one today as well, but both are clearly included. They're in, for those in the public, they're in the handout section, which should be, you're able to sort of click on and expand that section on the right-hand side of your dashboard as it is, and you'll see there's several attachments in there. There's a public comment, ISMND. That's where you'll find those comment letters. And then I've also obviously included as part of your, actually we can go to the next slide, and there's the options are available for you. And so what we have before you this evening is two resolutions. One is to approve 20-005 is to approve the initial study mitigated negative declaration. And the second one is to approve a resolution recommending that the town council approve both the ISMND and adopt the proposed zoning ordinance amendment. So 20-006 is the zoning ordinance amendment resolution. I do want to point out that was revised just earlier today. That is also in that handout section of your dashboard. So you can pull that up, and members of the public can pull that up. But I will explain exactly what was changed. There were some findings that were needed to be made pursuant to the zoning or the existing rules in our zoning ordinance for adding a use to the list of permitted or conditionally permitted uses in a zoning district. So by adding hotel uses in the C4 zoning district, several findings had to be made. And so this revised zoning ordinance amendment resolution does just that and includes that. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Nothing substantively changes in the zoning ordinance itself in that resolution. There are a few options for you. One is obviously approved. Two would be to approve resolutions with revisions or further recommendations to the town council. And I'm going to recommend fairly strongly that if there are things that you would like to see in this ordinance or comments that you think need to be addressed, that those comments be forwarded on to the town council for their review, as they are ultimately the approving body for this ordinance. This commission also did see this a year ago, and I know the town council is very, it's been some time, and they've wanted to see this sort of move forward, especially in light of sort of the economic development goals and objectives of this ordinance, and sort of the time, the appropriateness of the timing for that, frankly, given where we are these days. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and thank you for listening. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. At this point, I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions for staff. Commissioner Metcalf, do you have any questions for staff?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Bundy.
Yes, Adam. I was curious, the CEQA and the EIR, nothing seemed unexpected in it, having looked at a number of EIRs related to projects here in Corte Madera. But my recollection was we were sort of pushed to do that under threat that there could be a lawsuit if we didn't do that. Am I correct?
I'm not going to comment on the last part of that, other than just to say that we had public comment regarding the need under the legislation, CEQA legislation, to do some further analysis on the ordinance, and we agreed with that. So that's what we ended up doing. But no, I mean, the mitigated negative declaration, it's not an EIR. I want to clarify that as well. It has, I think importantly, what it notes, and is sort of a theme, is that obviously we're not looking at any particular project right now. We don't have a project before us. We have an ordinance, which is sort of more generic in that it will allow some additional development to occur if a project gets approved. And so that's sort of what we're doing through the analysis, is sort of assessing how much development might occur, giving some information with which to understand better that aspect of the proposal, and then sort of going through the potential effects than what we can know at this time, without sort of getting into speculation about who's going to build where, and because that could, obviously we don't know that. And so in that respect, yes, the mitigation measures for air quality relate to sort of mitigation measures you've seen before, and same for the other categories that are in there.
The other question I had was the idea of allowing only 2 bonuses per zone and 4 total. And I can understand the idea of avoiding too much clustering or what this might impact, but could this potentially have unexpected consequences down the road if the need for hotels changes dramatically, in one direction? Are we going to have to reconsider this?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that possibility, but I think I'm pretty confident that, to be honest, you can only look out so far, and if we're able to achieve through this ordinance the development of 2 to 3, hotels in the next 20, 30 years, that's gotta, I think would be pretty successful. There's at that point in time, if there was a need to reevaluate, that could be done. But really what we're looking at is sort of a medium term objective, and frankly, I think we'd be very lucky and fortunate to get to 2 or 3 hotels, let alone 4. And the spacing of them is, I think responds directly to a policy consideration. That's certainly something that, if we took that out, could be more flexible. and allow them to seek out more opportunities in certain zones. But these zones are not really, they're pretty small areas to begin with. So I think you start getting, it's unlikely that you'd get more than, frankly, 2 in each zone to begin with, I would think, when you start to really investigate the sites.
No further questions.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Ms. Vandell, do you have any questions for staff at this point? Margaret, can you hear me?
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So where in the process does the evaluation of this, the bonus points come in? Does it come in after the whole hotel has been planned and they're kind of asking for more space, and then they say, well, if we do this, then would you give us this? Or does it come in right at the beginning when they're...
Yes, and thank you. Yeah, no, that's a good question. The actual, when you look at the conditions, and this is spelled out in condition number 2 of the ordinance. So this speaks to the community process. And so it says specifically, an applicant seeking to utilize the provisions described in this section shall submit an application for preliminary review with the planning department, and the applicant's project shall require a minimum of 1 public hearing at a study session before the planning commission. A primary purpose of the study session shall be to preliminarily evaluate the proposed project in light of the additional FAR requested, consistent with the findings and additional FAR assignment schedule described in the section. So, as you know, we hold these preliminary review meetings, and really the intent is that an early time, or in the process of the development process, that we allow the planning commission, members of the public, to come and hear essentially at that time a conceptual proposal, and that would be very importantly the time in which comments on whether or not the additional FAR could be achieved with what is being proposed would be discussed. And so that was intentionally tried to front load that as much as possible. And so, I think you have to have enough information in a project to start to sort of discuss those things, but definitely that needs to be in the front of the process, and that was the intent behind that particular condition. And I should mention, even before the preliminary review meeting, the applicant, condition number 3 says an applicant shall hold at least 1 applicant-sponsored community meeting to solicit feedback and comments from community members prior to the submission of an application for preliminary review. So, frankly, we could probably add there, if we wanted to have them discuss the bonus mechanism and the points with the community, that could be part of that as well.
Does that answer your question, Margaret?
Yeah, it does. I don't have anything else.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rizzo, do you have any questions for staff?
Just 2 clarifications. On the bonus points, you briefly mentioned is it they just need to meet the minimum amount, or they got to meet the entire amount to get the bonus points for the additional FAR?
So in order to get approved for
an increase,
an increase over what's current, all 4 findings have to be made. Now, some of them, like the environmental sustainability, talks about Cal Green +3 gives you 2 points. Sure. So that would meet the finding, but those 2 points only translate into 0.02 FAR, right? So if you want to achieve higher degrees of floor area or additional floor area, you're going to have to exceed or achieve additional, basically achieve a higher level of meeting that finding. So, but yes, you could have 1 point in any of the in 4 findings, and you would technically get the bonus, but you'd be at 0.38 FAR instead of 0.34 FAR. Does that answer the question? I mean, so it's sort of up to the applicant to sort of seek the amount of floor area that they believe they need to achieve their project, but that doesn't mean that has to, then you have to actually work with the point structure to get there, and that's a discretionary part of the process.
Okay, and then but I know I also kind of talked to you about a little bit about one of the things that I think could be.
This is a question for staff, Jim.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I'm trying to. I know that there is is there provisions in the code for when? Okay, the FAR is what the FAR is after they go through their checklist of of the bonus program that you have. But we also, the clarification is we also have discretionary review over some of the bulk and the massing through the general plan and some of the other findings, correct? Especially in areas where we have transitionary uses from, say, R1 into the commercial district?
Yeah, so and specifically as in this ordinance, and on top of the regular design review findings, which would have to be made, this has another finding that talks about that the totality of the project is designed with a coherent site-specific architectural idea, that it harmonizes the relationships between the project components and between the project and adjacent buildings, streets, open spaces, and natural setting through the use of appropriate building scale, massing, fenestration, exterior materials, and landscape design. So that gives you plenty of room for the commission to mold things like you're talking about, setbacks or upper story, ways in which that transition might occur from one type of use to this use in these areas.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And I have just a mild question, Adam. And is there a point in the process relative to Margaret's question that the applicant gets locked down into this such that they can't come back later and say, okay, now that you've reviewed it, we want to go for the bonus?
I'm not sure I'm totally following. You mean in terms of after the preliminary review meeting or after they get approval?
Yeah, after preliminary review. I'm just wondering the cautionary question about whether or not they can say, okay, now that we know what you're telling us about what we can do, we want to revise our application upward. They're allowed to do that.
Fair enough. Yeah, yes. And I don't, but I think the commission is perfectly within, again, I would view that as sort of, if it's significant change to the application at that point, you would need to go back for another review of that preliminary review meeting, which as you know, we've done for other projects. And you can have multiple preliminary review meetings, even though only one's required. But I know I think I understand what you're saying, is that you sort of get direction and then they push the envelope, so to speak, to get a little bit more. I don't think there's anything necessarily preventing that, but like I said, if the project changed, the commission would also have that ability to
we have the discretion
rethink how you're going to distribute those points.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think it's time to head toward public comment on this item. So I see that we have 23 people listening. Tracy, you're going to be the arbiter of people and so forth. So I'm going to put it in your hands to start taking public comment.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. I see, I'm just going to go down and check our attendees here on the webinar for raised hands. I see Fred has his hand raised. I'm going to unmute you, Fred. It looks like he's self-muted. Fred, if you, there you go.
Yeah, my hand is actually had it down. I don't have any questions.
It's now back up. Flip it one more time. If you click it again, it'll go down.
Now it's showing up. Now it's down.
I will consider it a down hand. Thank you, Fred.
Okay,
I
next.
see Lucinda Smith has a raised hand. Lucinda, I've unmuted you.
I'm unmuted, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Adam, for such a nice presentation. I think I understand parts of it, but I have to admit I don't understand it all. I would like to just point out on that one of that first slides that you showed, the meetings where it's been discussed. I think you might mean August 2020, 2019, not 2020, because 2020 hasn't arrived yet. So you might want to put that to the record.
Yeah, thank you.
Also, I wanted to ask if this ordinance will apply just to hotels, or will it also include apartment buildings? I'd like to see some kind of a comparison. It's hard to see what 1 acre means. If it's undeveloped territory at this point, or if it's got a building on it that would have to be demolished so the project could go forward. And I couldn't really tell from your slides what was really there in terms of size and application of this 1 acre area. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, I think doubling the FAR and all these bonus points and everything that you're coming up with have already been exceeded by the Ridge project. That to me just is an eyesore for our town in terms of height and density. So I'm a little concerned about having more hotel space with more density, whereas I think that one project kind of completed it for the whole town. And then I did cover where on the map we have any open land. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam will take note of all the questions, and at the end of public comment, he will address them as best he can. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to mute you and lower your hand. I'm checking for additional raised hands with our attendees. Okay, I'm going to check our public comment email for any comments that have come in there, and I see none.
Okay, so people are watching but don't want to say anything. That's okay. All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think it may be useful. I'm not going to read the letters, but I think it may be useful just to mention the comment letters that we did get from the ISMND. One was from the Marin Audubon Society and Barbara Salzman. And the other one was from the Friends of Corte Madera Creek Watershed. I think both were concerned really about that the ordinance didn't specifically prohibit any filling of wetlands as sort of a straight prohibition. And so the comments were related to how that was characterized in the initial study mitigated negative declaration. And I just wanted to, we did include a short response to comment memo, which is also in that public comment folder on the dashboard from Steve Nowak at PlaceWorks, which provides some responses. Let me see if I can review it real quick. but essentially it talks about, that we do have already general plan policies in place that talk about the procedures for dealing with proposals that would potentially impact sensitive resources and natural resources and systems. And as we know, we've been through that. And then I think it's also important to point out that the document does say that any new proposal would clearly have to be reevaluated with respect to our own general plan policies, new biological resources assessment. And further, I think some of the findings that were included in this ordinance specifically speak to, in the design section, respecting and exhibiting natural systems rather than sort of either damaging them or diminishing them. And so those are meant to be very pretty clear guidelines for how sites should be developed pursuant to this ordinance. So those were the brief responses, but I just wanted to mention those are in the public comment handout there. So I know with this way of doing things, it's not always as easy just to pick up a piece of paper and pass it around. So I wanted to just make that clear. And then in response, if we don't have any more public comment, Tracy, just in response to Lucinda, maybe we can go back to, I guess the first thing is, and this only applies to hotels. This will not apply to apartment buildings or multifamily housing. To be clear though, it theoretically could apply to a sort of a suite type of hotel project, which is more of like the Marin Suites, some of the longer term stay hotels. So that's part of this. But let's go back to the 1 acre map if we can, because I think it wasn't clear. And to Lucinda's question, every site that we're looking at right now that is greater than 1 acre, those are all already developed sites in town with some use. Some are more current than others. We do have some vacant properties in town. And actually, Tracy, if you go to the map with the yellow, I think it was, then one right before this, I think. Okay, right. So this is a map that shows, again, that the ordinance would only be eligible for lots, and that's lots that are greater than 1 acre in size. So you can kind of see, again, where those properties are currently. It's not, I don't want to say it's misrepresenting, but for example, on Casa Buena, this little 1 square is the parking lot for the car dealership, and the car dealership is owned, they have the same owners. So that could be another site that, because it'd be very easy to combine those lots into one to make them over 1 acre. But all of these sites currently have uses on them. So yes, it would, in almost all certainty, require demolition of existing uses on the site and then rebuilding something to a new use, a new hotel use. I think you also brought up a good point though, to make, that this also includes sort of hotel ancillary uses, things like restaurants that you often see associated with the hotel, the business center component or conference portion of it could be part of that hotel project. And so it's not necessarily just hotels themselves that are subject to this additional FAR, but it's essentially the hotel is the primary use and an ancillary use could be part of it. And one of the reasons for that is some of these ancillary uses, when you start talking about the findings for community integration, could very well be community geared spaces, or whether it's a community room, it could be retail use, it could be a restaurant, other things that are intended to sort of serve and integrate the property with surrounding neighborhoods or the community as a whole. So, and then I think the last was more of a comment about Tam Ridge than anything. So I think I tried to answer those questions.
Very well. I think that does the trick on addressing those items. Tracy, do you have any further public comment at this point?
I will check.
Just want to be
I do not see any additional or new raised hands
okay.
with our attendees, and I do not
Okay.
have any correspondence by email.
All right, so being overly cautious here, but with that said, we'll close the public comment section of this meeting. So for those of you who are watching, what we'll do is we'll deliberate between the members of the commission, and if that results in a vote, so be it, or we'll see where we end up with this issue. And after that process, we'll move on to the next agenda item. So I'm going to start with you, Phyllis, and see what your thoughts are regarding this proposed ordinance and not ordinance, recommendation and resolution to the town council.
Well, I like the way it's evolved since we first started working on it, about 1.5 years ago. One of the things that I think you've done, Adam, that's worked quite well is that, number one, putting the architectural part first, because if you don't have good architecture, it's just going to be sprawl. And also what will avoid sprawl is the additional height. I would rather see us go a little bit taller to the height that you were mentioning than limited to the normal 35 feet and not have it that sprawled out. So I think it's definitely the right direction to go, and a lot of work has gone into it. I think we've really reached a plateau where we should move forward.
All right, so that would say that you would feel that item, without hearing from the other commissioners, but at this point, you would feel that option number 1 would be appropriate, which would
Yes,
be
the 2 resolutions I could approve.
all right. Dr. Bundy, your thoughts?
I think this has been a very difficult process. I remember the discussions we had, and then Adam has crafted it well, working with the town council. I think it brings Corte Madera into line with the rest of the community, and what needs to be done for new hotel development or redevelopment. I can support the findings and support the resolutions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bandel.
I think it's a really creative way for the town to gain some benefit from the hotel, and for hotels to have a lot of direction that to follow, a real sort of way of planning their buildings. I had one quick question, and is the enforcement of the enhancements, when they come along and say, we're going to do this, and this is our building, and we've gotten these extra points, and then later on they say, well, that's not going to work out. How is that going to work? Do we have a plan for that?
Yes, I think in specifically things like if there's a certain, let's just use the example again of community rooms promised or something like that. Those things I think can very easily be attached as conditions of approval to any approval of the project. So especially because hotels are still going to be required, to be granted a conditional use permit. So it's not, that doesn't go away. You still have a conditional use permit. You still have design review. So those promises can be codified in those approvals that may be granted. And so if they're not followed through with, or they're not executed, that calls into question the validity of those permits at the end of the day. And there is a process under the conditional use permit process to revoke, if it, at the end of the day, to revoke those permits if need be.
I remember the discussion that we had about the condition of on-site living quarters for people. And I remember and thinking back about that, how hard that would be to kind of enforce. But I get it, and I think it's a good plan, and I think it's really well thought out, and I could approve it.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Rizzo, your thoughts.
My thoughts, I did a lot of reading this week, about 335 pages. And through the reading, I think, and plus I'm reading of course, I've read over the town's general plan, and I think staff and commission, as well as the town council, has done a very good job in aligning the town's general plan with some of the findings required, and allowing flexibilities not only to the developers, but also the discretion for us to approve projects in the future. One of the 2 or 3 things that I really like is the amount of community outreach before this even gets to a point where we need to review it. Bringing the community in early, I think, is key to getting these things approved and for a successful project in general. I feel like I can support this based on the, really the process that has developed in approving these projects in the future. And I think they've done a good job of limiting the total amount of projects in one area, so we don't have, a little mini downtown of hotels in the middle of town, and, allows for some diversification in some of the uses. I think it'll do a lot of good in the future, to liven up some of the areas of town that have some older uses, commercial uses. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. I agree with the commissioners as a whole here that staff has done a great job over the time period that this has been gestating. And you guys have created, beyond what we did previously, a good set of parameters. And I think it's time to get this moved forward into the council's hands and let the public domain chew on it. And if there are projects out there, let's bring it on and assess it. I think it's a great thing, and I support it. So with that said, I think we're all at the point, unless there's something else anyone wants to add, that we will ask for a motion for these 2 items as presented by staff. Who is willing to make those motions?
And just I'll butt in here just for a second, and just remind you that we do have a revised zoning ordinance reso. That's the reso 20-006. And as I mentioned, those just have a couple additional findings that were included in there. So that should be part of any motion referencing the revised resolution that was provided to you.
Yes.
And then Tracy, if you don't, yeah, that's fine.
So if anybody's going to make a motion, the reso that was sent out later this afternoon, as Adam says, 20-006, that's the one that we're after. And someone please start the process.
I'll make the resolution, Peter.
Okay.
I move that we approve the 2 resolutions in the matter of in consideration and possible planning commission recommendations to the town council. Those are resolutions number 20-005 and the revised resolution 20-006.
Okay,
I'll second that.
thank you, Bob. All right, roll call.
All right, we'll start with Commissioner Rizzo,
Hey,
Commissioner Bandel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bundy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Metcalf,
Yes,
and Chairman Chase.
Yes,
All right, thank you very much.
okay. So now we are on to item B. This is the new hearing for a 626 Oakdale Avenue design review application number PL 2019-0106 and variance application PL 2019-0107 for 935 square foot second level addition, single story home, and variance for a portion of the second floor addition encroaching 1 foot 3 inches into the side yard setback at 626 Oakdale Avenue. So, Mr. Boyle, this is your presentation. Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you, Chairman Chase. Can everybody hear me okay?
yes,
Great. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Phil Boyle. I'm the Senior Planner with the town of Corte Madera, and welcome Commissioner Rizzo to the Planning Commission. Nice to see you in person. You're welcome. Tracy will pull up a PowerPoint presentation that I have for this item that's on your agenda. There it is. Thank you, Tracy. And as Chairman Chase mentioned, this is an application for a design review and variance for 935 square foot second level addition to an existing single story home, and a variance for a portion of the second floor addition to encroach 1 foot 3 inches into the side yard setback. The parcel is located at, the property is located at 626 Oakdale Avenue in the R1 zoning district. Tracy, if you could give me the next slide, please. Project location, the home is not that far away from Town Hall on the south side of Tamalpais Avenue as Oakdale kind of climbs up the hill in the steeper part of Oakdale Avenue. Very unusual shaped lot, as you will see and you will hear about. It's kind of the shape of the state of Idaho, I would say. And with Oakdale as its address, and then Manzanita Court on the long rear property line running along in an arced formation. There's no vehicle access to the site from Manzanita Court. Next slide, please. And a project summary, the existing single family home, which was built in the 1950s, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, is 2,244 square feet, including the garage. And the proposed, with the second level that they're putting on top, the total square footage will be 3,145 square feet. Existing height is 16 feet. And the proposed height with the second story will be 25 feet, 10 inches. The code allows a maximum of 30 feet in that zoning district. Next slide, please. Continuing on with the summary, the existing floor area ratio is 28%, and the proposed is 40%. Which is the maximum that's allowed. So they will be maxing out the floor area ratio. The lot coverage existing is also 28%, proposed 32%, and the maximum allowed is 40%. As I mentioned, and I'll show in the site plan, the variance is requested to encroach into the west side setback approximately a little over 1 foot. Next slide, please. This is the proposed and the existing site plans. Little bit difficult to see here on the screen, but that's why I gave you all the large sets of plans. Hopefully you were able to review those. And apologize, that may be a little bit difficult for the public. But again, this is not even showing, because it's such an unusual lot, this is only showing the bottom southern part. Oops. The bottom southern part, thank you. The bottom southern part of the lot where the building is located. But again, not a significant change in the site plan because the addition is above the existing building. And next slide, please. This is the survey which the applicants provided, again, which able us to determine that and be sure that the building is located in the correct place and that the addition is being located where they are proposing it to be. And this was provided by the applicant. Next slide, please. This is showing the proposed first floor modifications and the proposed second floor addition. So the first floor, not a significant amount of changes to the exterior, mainly some changing of some windows. They're expanding the kitchen, which you can see kind of in the center of the left floor plan. The kitchen is being bumped out towards the backyard slightly, and more or less the first level entryway is being opened up. Bedroom is being turned into a dining room, and that whole first level entryway is being turned into a kind of a great room with kitchen, living, and dining area, and the new stairs to access the second floor. Moving now over to the right, this is the second level floor plan, again showing the stairs going up and the proposed 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom will be proposed on the second floor. And if you look on the upper left, again shown better on your yard sets of plans, on the upper left of that floor plan, you can see the small area that is encroaching into the setback. This is an area of approximately 10 square feet. And I explain it in the staff report, and I'll mention it now, makes sense. One reason the applicant is requesting this variance is because of the structural and aesthetic difficulty in creating that second level wall to meet the setbacks. It would have to go in at an angle, and it would be structurally difficult and aesthetically difficult to meet that setback and not encroach the 1 foot that they're asking for. So that kind of gives you a visual. I think this is the best visual to see that. It's a little easier to see in this view than it is on the elevations. This also shows that the red dashed line is the setback lines, and you can see on the top of this slide, and then to the right, kind of that swooping, you can see it's just a very unusual area in which it is legal to build. And next slide, please, Tracy. So now turning to the exterior and the elevations. The first image here on the top is the existing home. Again, single story, kind of a ranch style home, long roof line, long building that runs parallel to Oakdale. And then you have 2 gables, one over the entryway, and then one over the master bath, and a garage door to your right. The proposal is starting from the first floor, is to going right to left, is to add 2 dormers, kind of long, low dormers to break up that extensive roof line. The 1 dormer above the garage and the other dormer above the master bedroom. And then moving to the left, the front entryway gets reconfigured, the door gets centered, the existing gable is removed, and a new kind of broader gable and more distinct gable is created to highlight that entryway. And then of course above that is the second floor. Again, the intention is to, and the architect will speak more of this, is to provide a sense of balance and kind of cohesion in placing the second floor at this location as opposed to somewhere else on the building. Next slide, please. Looking at the rear addition, again, similar to the front in terms of the second story gable and then the shed roof off to one side. Some modifications to the windows and doors of the first level. Siding will stay the same. I'll just mention here they are using a mixed types of siding. You've got horizontal wood siding on the existing building of first floor and vertical board and batten siding on the second level. The entire building will be re-roofed with the composite shingle roof being replaced with a standing seam metal roof. Again, another aspect in this, more or less the center of the first floor, opening up that part of the great room, part of the family room, to allow access with those accordion doors into the backyard. And next slide, please. This is the east elevation. Again, mainly this showing the where you'll have one of the bedrooms and then two longer windows of the master bedroom. Quite a long distance from this elevation to the nearest neighbor, probably well over 100 feet. And next slide, please. This is the existing proposed west elevation. This is the area where it's closest to the property line, closest to the adjacent neighbor to the west, and that front left corner of the second floor is your variance area. They have obtained support and have encouragement from the neighbors to the west. They signed the letter that was passed around to the neighborhood, and that's in your packet. There were also no letters of objection whatsoever that were sent to staff for this project. And I will go to the next slide, please. So again, more or less just to give you a sense of ceiling height and attic space. These are two of the proposed sections of the second story addition, one cutting through the stair and one cutting through the hallway area. And next slide, please. So I just want to give it a summary of the analysis of potential impacts per design review and the variance findings. These are all in much more detail in your staff report. There was, in terms of studying and evaluating natural light and shading impacts, a shade study was done by the applicant, and that's included in your packet. And I described some of the impacts, relatively minor in terms of the total amount of time that shading will be cast upon the adjacent structure. Again, that's my interpretation, but that's what one can certainly see that from the shade study. Privacy was addressed by the careful location of windows and the size of windows, and also they were considering the fact that the nearest neighbor to the west, a good portion of their home or their building, I should say, is closest to this project is the garage space. In terms of views, the applicant worked with staff and the neighbors to try to minimize view impacts by having the addition as far away from the folks across the street to the south on Oakdale, who would look across the street and looking north. This is quite a distance from them. Also, the folks across the street on Oakdale Avenue are at a higher elevation. So based upon the story poles, it appears that they will, a very small amount of their view will be impacted, but again, a very, very small amount. And again, no comments were received from the neighbors. The one comment that I did receive was from a gentleman way back in February when this originally came to us. He had concerns about nighttime lighting, exterior lighting. And actually with that, well, I won't have you go back, Tracy. I'll show. In the next image, you will see, as well as the exterior lighting that you see on the plans, and I confirmed this with the architect, is actually incorrect. The proposed lighting that is dark sky compliant and was shown to the neighbor is the lighting and the cut sheet that's in your packet. So I just want to make sure that's clear. That is clear that the lighting shown on the plans is different than the lighting that is proposed and that will be approved. And there will certainly be a note in the staff report and on the plans that the lighting on the cut sheet is what is being approved. And next slide, please, Tracy. So that really concludes my presentation. Staff is able to make all of the design review and the variance findings. They're outlined in the staff report. Find that the 935 square foot second story addition is in keeping with other second story additions and second story original homes in the area and is designed to complement the original building footprint, placing the addition over the portion of the house that includes the main living area, such as the great room, one of the main bedrooms, and the entryway, gives the building a uniform and balanced appearance. And this is also the area that will require the smallest variance in this very unusually shaped lot. So with that, and I also want to mention that the applicants did provide a color and materials board, which if we weren't in our current state, I would be passing around to you, but I can assure you all the physical materials are here in colors. And so that is present. And with that, staff recommends approval of the attached resolution number 20004. The applicant is here, who's the architect and also the property owner. And prior to his presentation, I would like to show a brief video or a flyover that he provided.
Okay, so let's do this before you go to that, and then just before the presentation, I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions for you as a result of anything you've said. So Commissioner Metcalf, do you have any questions for Phil?
Yes, I do, Peter. Since we don't get to physically see the materials board, Phil, would you please describe exactly what a standing seam metal roof is? I am not familiar with that term.
A standing seam metal.
What exactly is it? Are there ever reflection problems because of the fact that the roof itself is metal, etc.?
My best description of a standing seam metal roof is if you've been to Tahoe or any place where there gets a lot of snow, it's pretty common to see cabins with blue roofs. Sometimes they're different colors, but they're often blue. That is a standing seam metal roof that you may recognize. And if that visual doesn't help you, it is basically a metal roof that is made of sheet metal. It is flat with ridges about 2 inches or so sticking up, and is a very durable and strong roof. Color, of course, is a factor in terms of reflectivity. They're proposing a gray roof. Most of them are either that I've seen are either gray or dark blue. I've never seen one that's a shiny aluminum type of metal.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Phil, that's your question for the moment?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Bundy, any questions from you?
No questions.
Okay. Margaret Mandel.
Did I miss something in the staff report? Because I didn't see any letters of the neighbors. I saw a chart with X's on it and approved, not approved, and the different numbers. Were there letters?
There were not, I may have misspoke. I meant to say comments or signatures.
I
There were-
didn't say, I just saw that chart. Is that all there was?
Right. They went around and got the signatures of their neighbors after looking at the plans.
Okay, and the people that weren't there, were they Xed as approved, or how were they? The people who didn't have any comments, how were those accounted for?
They got a total of 12 approvals, and I know they went back several times to get some people to comment and weren't able to receive comment. And I think that the owner may be able to give you some more details on that, because I know he was working on it for quite some time.
And did that happen during the time of after we had to shelter in place, or was that beforehand?
I believe they did it before and after, because this was originally submitted way back in December. We were scheduled to go mid-March, COVID-19, and so they had a number of quite a few letters of, or quite a few signatures of support at that time, and then it was postponed till now. And people were noticed in March, and then noticed that it was canceled, and then noticed again in May for this meeting.
Okay, I guess I have some questions for the owner of how they conducted that.
Sure.
I can ask that later.
Yes, you may. Very good. Anything else, Margaret? This
No,
time? Okay.
not now.
Mr. Rizzo, any questions for staff at this time?
Yes. Which was the neighbor that they couldn't get the signature for? They're still chasing. Is it the adjacent neighbor to the west?
No, not the neighbor to the west. It was the neighbor, I believe, 2 over to the west, not the direct west.
Did the neighbor to the west support it, or just say that they saw the plans?
The neighbor, from my indication from the owner, says the neighbor at 626 saw the plans and support the project.
Okay.
And
And one last question. Is this the only proposal from the architect? Did they propose anything that did not have a variance? Did they work to set back that addition at all with you? Or?
I met with him several times, and we talked through, the pros and cons and the challenges of requesting a variance. They certainly recognized that there was a way to build this project without a variance, but it was their desire and their hope that, given the circumstances and the uniqueness of it, that this would be the best project and meet their clients' needs and have a minimum impact. And so that's why they went ahead and requested the variance, but they certainly recognize the risk of it. But to answer your question directly, no, they never proposed a project without a variance.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I don't have any questions. I did have a question about that variance, but when I saw that the existing building was in that location, and it made sense to me that they built on top of it. I don't have a question about it. So then let's go directly to your fly through, and I guess that Mr. Grabham will be the next person that we will hear from. Is that who wants to make the presentation?
Yes, I guess. Should I turn off my video, Tracy?
Mr. Grabham, would you like to share your webcam?
Sure. Can you hear me?
You can.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear. There you go.
You can let me know if you would like me to go ahead, or when you'd like me to go ahead and play the flyover.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
There you go.
I will pull up the plan set for you in case you would like to utilize that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to the commissioners for setting up this meeting and trying to push projects forward. I know that this has been a really difficult time, and trying to get into this year's building season every month and every week counts at this point. And I'm just really appreciate you guys taking the time to try to help out and push these projects forward. I met with Phil 7 or 8 months ago with our conceptual drawings. We always take our conceptual drawings and go in and try to speak with the planners. And I've known Phil for a long time, and he was really helpful. This is a really difficult property with the shape of the property. The setbacks are all skewed. There's no real straight lines to pull off. And the best advice I think he gave me was to try to stay within the setbacks as much as possible. Initially, our first design was pushed forward in the front yard setback because that's really tight. And then we ended up taking that whole third bedroom piece and shifting it back in order to stay within the front yard setback. The interesting thing about those setbacks is it's actually, if you took the line between the neighbor and my client's property, it's actually within the setback regulations, which is 12 feet. It's more than 12 feet away from the neighbor, but for some reason, when they did the lot development, they kicked that line off to the side, and that kind of skewed not only the opportunity for the neighbor to build toward the front of their house, but also for my client to build toward the back. So what I tried to do was stay as close into that setback as possible, and keep, I know that variances are difficult to get, and we were doing our very best to try to load that second story and keep everything within the setback. If you look at page A2.3, one of the issues I was having when I was designing this project was trying to get, like Phil said, structure to tie down to my shear walls in that corner without a really big long beam end to end, and then where I load the beam on the lower floor, because it's an open floor plan on the lower floor. And basically what happens is when you walk up the stairs, it's 3'6", 3'6", 3'6" tall, and you can see that door that creates the bedroom on the right is literally right there. And what happened was it created the bedroom on the left is only 11 foot too wide, and I was dealing with a really long, more narrow room, trying to keep it more like the bedroom on the right, which is almost 13 feet by almost 13 feet. So, or 14 feet. So just dealing with those design constraints. And then also when I spoke with Phil the first time, one of the big concerns was the neighbors up the hill and blocking their view out over this house. So what we did was, instead of creating a big gable end across the front, man, hold on one second. Yeah. Let me just plug my battery in, sorry.
This is the hazards of.
Hopefully, sorry, I had it plugged into the wrong one. This is my second town council meeting tonight. I was in Larkspur also. Instead of creating a big dormer across the front, I did the smaller dormer that I flipped the other bedroom dormer in order to keep that roof down as low as possible, and maximize as much view as I could for the neighbors going back the other way. I think that this plan, this house is not the most architecturally pleasing house. It has some really kind of funky details, that the gable coming off the front, the two gables on the low, really long expanded roof, which is why we added in those dormer kicks, was to try to get rid of those and give it some appeal from the front, and then also create a more formal front entry, as opposed to just a box you can see on the first floor in the model picture. It's just basically a little box right there, and then we put in a nice beam and some stain grade material to kind of really make it a warm, comfortable front entry. Yeah, our client went around and met with all the neighbors several times. We provided that same fly around video for them. We do a modeling program, which makes it a lot easier for not only the neighbors to visualize, but also our clients, and of course the planning commission staff. The other concern was shading the property next door, and so we did the sun study. 622 Oakdale, as you can see from the sun study, it blocks a little bit of the morning sun, but other than that, there's not really an effect. It kind of goes around the house on the back way. I mentioned the 12 feet between the neighbor's house and our house. We did recess the upper story off of the front to give it less mass appeal, so that it didn't look like we were double stacking walls, which I think stepping it back give it lots of really nice shape. We are around 25 feet for the building height as opposed to 30 feet. Again, trying to keep the mass of the building smaller as opposed to a big house. It is over 3,000 square feet, and we wanted to keep the neighborhood feel of the house. The variance is 10 square feet, and yeah, we could have done like a little jog in the wall right there, but I feel like there would have been really no effect change on the neighbors in order for us to do that, and it just would have made it look a little bit more funky. Minimal additional lot coverage. The way that their lot is shaped now, they don't have much yard, and which is why the second story was so desirable. There's kind of not much yard, and then there's a steep hill that kind of goes down to Manzanita Court. So trying to keep as much yard as possible. Trying to connect the lower level, which is what I was talking about with the open floor plan in the family room, and in order for us to run it would have to be a massive steel beam in order to accomplish that setback on that left side. A standing seam is a roof. I don't know if you could see it in the model. It actually is in the model. It's a really popular roof. A lot of people are putting on their houses now. It's kind of a higher end look. I don't know if Tahoe Cabin, Phil, that's cringy when you said that, but a lot of the nicer higher end houses, a lot of people do now have the standing seam roof. It's a very nice roof. It's also a very expensive roof. So, but I think it gives the house a really nice appeal. We tried really hard to design a house that has lots of very nice shape and fits in the neighborhood really well without feeling massive. And I think those are the main things that we accomplished. We would have liked to have not gone through this with a variance, but we thought that 10 square feet and no effect, positive or negative on the neighbor would be kind of something that in the awkwardness of the lot. And fitting that whole entire thing together, believe it or not, was quite a puzzle. So other than that, do you guys have any questions for me?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Grabham. In lieu of the commissioners all asking you this, I think one thing that's on everybody's mind is the process by which you solicited the neighbor feedback. And if you would go into that a little detail and say who's missing from the signature sheet. And in particular, I'm wondering about the neighbor at the corner of the bend around I think it's 623. So go ahead and tell us about the neighbor solicitation and so forth.
Okay, so, but I actually was not involved in the neighbor solicitation. My client felt more comfortable doing that on his own, and that we basically produced a fly around model for him to bring to the neighbors, and he met with them one-on-one. So he's on this call tonight, and I'm sure he'd be happy to speak with you about that. But I know that he put in a lot of work going from neighbor to neighbor and showing them the plan and helping them understand the project. So he'll have to answer that one on his own.
Yeah, so we'll throw that at him as a question, but I will start then with Commissioner Metcalf and ask her if she has any questions for you about this.
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bundy, Dr. Bundy, do you have any questions? No questions. All right, Margaret.
I'm kind of curious about this roof because I've seen a lot of them on the East Coast, and personally, I like them. But that's the only metal roof in the whole neighborhood. In fact, I haven't seen any in others in Corte Madera. So
there are plenty, believe me.
How is that going to fit into the neighborhood?
It does. Well, there are plenty of other metal roofs.
Okay.
Yes, there are.
I haven't seen.
I'm speaking out of turn for the applicant there, but I know because we've actually approved some.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Oh, yeah, I've personally put on 5 or 6 in just Corte Madera alone. And I just got approval for a project in Larkspur with the same metal roof, and we put them on almost all our projects. I have a feeling that this is kind of the new wave. In fact, I'm doing one of these standing seam roofs with in Santa Fe, and the solar panels are actually underneath, incorporated into the standing seam, so you don't even see the solar panels. So I feel like this is the next big step in design and construction. It's a really beautiful process to see that solar that is incorporated into the standing seam roof. You can't even see it. It's incredible.
Does it get, this is just a curiosity question, and I know on the East Coast they do it for rain and snow and the ice that just slides right off it. But does it get very hot underneath it in the sun?
You know, I don't know that it gets any hotter or any cooler. What I do know is it's a lifetime roof. I think that's people's attraction to it. It's definitely 3 times as much as an asphalt roof, and I think people feel like it's all the flashings are really done really well, and it's just a really great protection on your home. So and then the style points you get for it, I think, is the main thing. A lot of the houses, I believe there's a house actually down the street very similar to this that got approved maybe a year or 2 ago. It's really beautiful, and I think they have a standing seam roof also. But I don't think it's for snow or rain or sun. It's just a lifetime roof people don't ever have to think about or deal with again, and there's a lot of appeal to that.
I can answer your question offline, Margaret.
Okay.
Beyond that, Mr. Rizzo, do you have any questions for the applicant? Can't hear you.
Yeah, I have a few questions. So some technical questions. Are you going to frame the joists for the addition east to west?
West. Yeah, to short wall, yes.
Short wall to
Or-
short wall, and
Southeast,
And-
west. Yeah, yes.
is that
It's already,
foundation?
I'm sorry, it's already like that, James, the roof. And typically what we do is we put the roof joists in and we attach the existing ceiling framing to that to try to eliminate the removal and disposal of more material in the sheetrock and all that. So we basically slip the new ones between the old ones and then attach them to try to keep the sheetrock lid.
Are you anticipating some foundation work on that same wall?
So what I did on the if you look at the demo plan, we're demoing that front wall. You could see the kitchen bump out, and part of the reason I did that is because that's a nice new foundation. I can put a nice load on. We did inspect the original foundation in our design group. We have a structural engineer, and the foundation looks pretty good. I know that we will have to underpin the shear wall areas, which basically would be to the south of the fireplace or lower toward the dining room. We may have to do some underpinning there to pick up the shear wall where I can get that double stacked wall connection. But other than that, we do a really nice, we try not to redo the whole foundation. We do post and pier, and then we do shear wall retrofits with underpinning, which basically means we dig underneath the foundation, we drill an epoxy rebar, and we put a bigger pad where those shear wall locations are. And that typically allows us to load the second story and capture the shear that way. We're a design build company, so we are always thinking about the budget and trying to be cost effective with our building and utilize the existing instead of tearing houses down, try to work with what we have.
So my next question would be, is there a way to set that wall back so you can drag the shear and not stack the wall? If you're rejoisting it anyway, right? So you're rejoisting it. Maybe you don't need to have a new beam is what I'm getting at. You could just beef up the joists and then carry it the 18 inches.
To answer your question, James, there is always a way to do things in construction. Everything, when we do these projects, we basically do conceptual designs and we budget our conceptual designs, and we try to build these homes very close to our original budget, because we've seen time and time again where people go through this process and they can't afford to do the project that's been approved. So we try to go in and design them reasonably and load them reasonably. There's always a way to put in steel beams and build with no walls. So, but the intent is always to build simply and consciously in a budget way that allows for our clients to afford the project.
And maybe one last question. And I don't know if this is Peter for the planner, but it seems like the calculations on the FAR, did they change? Because the existing first floor is 2243, and then the first floor on the proposed floor area goes down.
That would be a question for Phil to answer. Yeah.
Because they're actually adding square footage on the lower floor.
I can actually answer that, James. Okay. When we did our initial calculations, a piece of this on the first floor, basically we were over a tiny bit, and the way that your code is written, if you look at page A2.1, prior to us ever picking up this project, this storage room on the far right of A2.1 was not calculated in the FAR, and the ceiling height was, we didn't think it was included. The ceiling height was low, and we were told that if we had this below 7'5", that it wouldn't be calculated into our FAR. So we put in soffits there.
and I can, this is Phil, I can reiterate that is correct, that they were over their FAR. And so because they didn't include that storage area. And so modifying that storage area and reducing its ceiling height, it is not counted towards, FAR, it's just counted as storage, because it doesn't meet code to be, a livable space with that minimum ceiling height. And so that's how they are within the right at the FAR limit.
Yeah, our intention was to put cabinets there and drop a soffit on top of the cabinets anyways. So that was a way for us to avoid dropping the ceiling in the storage area.
Oh, wait a second. So there's cabinets underneath it as well?
There's right, the ceiling itself is being lowered as well as cabinets.
Yeah, well, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would mean that just about every kitchen, we would have to pull the FAR out.
No.
No,
I mean, if
because
I have a kitchen cabinet that's got a soffit over it, wouldn't count as FAR. What's the difference?
well, because in this case, they are actually lowering the ceiling.
Yes.
So the
They're
entire
lowering
or just
Kitchens, cabinets usually still go up to your ceiling, James. The whole entire point is that it's not 8 feet, it's under your livable space. So if you were in a kitchen and you dropped a soffit to lower your cabinets below 7'6", then you're absolutely correct, but nobody would want to do that, I don't think.
No, my question is, there's floor to ceiling cabinets there and you guys are just putting a soffit over it and then you're saying that it's not part of FAR.
Well, we had two options. One was to drop the ceiling of the storage room, which we had talked about. So if we had dropped the ceiling of the storage room, then it would just be a storage room. It wouldn't be counted as livable space. The other option was, because we didn't need to drop the whole entire thing, you can see we needed 58 feet. So in the storage room is 145. So if we dropped the ceiling in the storage room, again, this is the cost thing also. If we drop the whole ceiling in the storage room, then that's a lot more expensive than just putting in a couple soffits that get us 58 square feet. So that was the options that were presented to us, and that's how we chose to do that.
Okay.
All right. We've covered that well. We can talk about that later on in the program. So anything else, Mr. Rizzo?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, very good. So now, does Mr. Hansmeyer want to take it?
Sure, and I just took myself off mute, and it will not allow, it's not allowing me to access the webcam because it says we're at the maximum number of webcam users.
Mr. Graben, would you mute yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, can't hear you, so that's good. But Mr. Hansmeyer, let's see. Tracy, do you bring him in? There we go. All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Can the commissioners hear me?
Yes, we can see you.
Great. Thank you, Peter.
So please go ahead and if you have a statement or you wanted to talk about something, or if you would just like to answer our questions, what would you like to do?
Sure, a little bit of all of the above. So first and foremost, thank you for taking your time in these trying circumstances and getting this electronic meeting together. I know this is difficult, and as David, our architect, mentioned, we're racing against trying to meet a construction schedule and get the project built. So we appreciate your taking the time tonight to meet with us. I think the primary question for me involves the neighbor survey. So why don't we go ahead and address those questions? And David had graciously offered to, host a gathering and call the neighbors in group to talk about the project. I thought it would be more personal and give them a better forum for me to meet with each of them individually. So I did that, and we put together the checklist, which was approve not support, or neutral as kind of the qualifiers. And then over the course of a month and a half, because I didn't want to interfere with people's time and privacy, I went door to door to each of the neighbors. So first and foremost, the one missing neighbor is missing because that property was put up for sale during this process. Those homeowners, John and Sarah, relocated to London, and the house was unoccupied and on the market during the time in which we were filing with the commission for the plans. And now that house has since sold. There's new owners, but they're not living in the property yet. They're in the process of a fairly extensive refresh and remodel prior to occupancy. So the one that's missing there on the list is because there was no owner to communicate with. All of the other owners were shown the floor plans and the three-dimensional video that we shared with the commission tonight. And the meetings ranged from 15 minutes to 2.5 hours, depending on how many questions and what the concerns were. The overall result, as you can see, was that every neighbor that was met with supported the project. That's not to say they don't have concerns about construction in the neighborhood. Of course they do, but they understand the project. We're a valuable member of the neighborhood and community, and we took the time to walk each of them through the project and address all of their concerns. There's two residences that are potentially impacted more than the others. The first is our residence directly to the west, just across the 12-foot setback between the two properties. That's the residence that David referenced. They're impacted in proximity to the project and then potentially from the shade that's there. So those neighbors signed in support of the project. That's Ben and Libby. Ben and Libby are close friends of ours. They're very supportive of the project. They have a growing family as well, and they would like to be able to do some renovation work, and they want our support in future renovation. In fact, I think they're talking to David and David's group about what they could do to make that a better home for their family. So as you can see, they haven't filed any opposition. They've indicated that they support the project. And I just spoke with them this weekend again, and they provided me with their ongoing support for the project. So we think we've done a lot to address and minimize the potential impacts there. The other residence, which is directly up the hill across the street from us, potentially has the view impact. As David said, our plan was to engage with the city and Phil long before we ever filed the application package. We worked really closely with the planning department to ensure that we minimized any potential request for variances, and also worked very closely with the kind of unique nature of the property. In doing so, setting the second story addition off to the western edge of the property minimizes any potential view impact to the residents across the street. And if you look at that residence and you enter it and you look through the windows across the horizon, as you guys are aware, we have a lot of very mature trees in the area. So this is not an open sky situation. Much of that view is impacted with very large trees that are there. In speaking with that's a rental property. So I met with both the landowner and the tenants, all of which expressed support for the project. The one request that we had from the landowner is that we work closely with him on vegetation. And if there was a way to, trim existing vegetation, keep trees to a lower height to kind of open up some additional view, they would appreciate that. But we consider that a pretty minor mitigation request, and we intend to work with all of the adjoining owners to make sure that aesthetically, if there's things that we can do with vegetation, trees, or otherwise, we make it a good project for the neighborhood. And I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Peter,
I'm sorry,
shall I?
Chris, I have a question.
Sure,
I'm
James.
sorry. Okay. Did you, have you talked to the neighbors that are going to, obviously you're using the same design firm. Have you guys kind of discussed how the two designs can work together? Since the back of the house has 4 windows kind of that could have, impacts on looking on each other's properties?
Yeah, and I don't want to limit the potential that they could do with their property. From what I understand, and David may know more, their plans for their property do not involve a second-story addition, but rather a complete retooling of the interior space, some expansion into what's currently a laundry room and garage space. So there's not a side-by-side proposed second story. The timing for that, I think, is somewhere middle to the end of next year before they would bring that project to you. So from a project perspective, there's not much to try to coordinate together. The windows were a concern on that side of the house for that neighbor. So if you look at the design, the reality is that's a spectacular view of Mount Tam. And in a perfect world, that whole side would be glass because you could sit up there and watch the sunsets over Mount Tam. But in respect for the neighbor there and the privacy, we've greatly minimized the windows there. We intentionally put the bathroom located on that side of the house and kept it to one very minimal size window to both protect their privacy and create some separation between the two properties. So again, the mitigation measure was incorporated into design by very minimal windows on the western elevation. Sorry, Mr. Rizzo, I think got on mute. Yeah.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Right. Sorry, I had my microphone muted before. I wanted to go directly to Phyllis. Go ahead, Phyllis.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Dr. Bundy, do you have any questions for Chris?
No questions.
All right. Margaret, any questions for Chris? You're muted, I think.
Yeah, now I'm unmuted. What are the size of the windows that are looking into that next property?
Yeah, and again, David, we can ask David for the size of the windows. I think that my knowledge of those windows is they're a fairly standard dual pane, not dual pane, but dual panel window. So you're probably looking at something like 4 feet in width and in somewhere in the kind of 5 foot in overall height. So a small window by today's standards of, certainly
well,
not.
What is that? A sliding glass door window? Because it looked like a normal size window to me, looking right into someone else's home.
Yeah, and there's nothing to look into. So the residence to the west is a single story residence. The majority of the overlap between our home and their home is their garage and a laundry room, and it's at a lower elevation. There's nothing. Those windows are our second level. Will look over their roof. They don't look down into anything. There's a sizable fence. There's vegetation that grows over that fence, and it's not a direct one-for-one view. We couldn't see any more into the windows than we do now. And in fact, the current elevation on the west side in our home has a window there that we're proposing to minimize for privacy of both residences. So again, I think David's probably better to talk about it from an architectural perspective, but we try to mitigate any privacy issues by minimizing the windows along that western elevation.
Okay, and just to be really clear, again, what number was the house where the people had sold and no one is living there now?
Let me try to pull it, and I don't know if in the staff report, Phil has the little map that we've drawn, but it's across the street and 2 residences down. So it's outside of any view impact. It's outside of any shade impact. It's uphill and 2 doors down on the other side of Oakdale Avenue.
And just to be really clear for myself, you did talk to the residents in 621 and 623,
Correct.
and they absolutely no problem.
Correct.
Is that what you're?
I would never say absolutely no problem. It's Marin, it's Corte Madera, and nobody welcomes construction. But fortunately for us,
about views, the long-term kind of thing, not the trucks moving up the hill.
No.
The view or the closeness or the privacy or any kind of issue like that?
No, and to congratulate Phil and David, I think the early engagement was very, very helpful. And by the time we met with the neighbors, we were showing them a design that was very thoughtful, that attempted to mitigate any of the potential impacts, and having the full design set, the 3D rendering, the shade study, went a long way to demonstrate how this would potentially impact the neighborhood. And again, we're very fortunate that we've got fantastic neighbors. It's a growing neighborhood. There's lots of new families coming in, and this is kind of the trend as these properties get renovated and kind of brought up to current standards as the property values have risen in Corte Madera.
Okay, I have nothing more.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rizzo, you have anything further at this point?
No, I apologize for jumping in, Peter. I didn't realize you were on mute. I didn't think anybody had a question.
That's all right. Thank you for saying that. So at this point, I'm going to ask Tracy to see if she has any public comment for it. We'll open it up for that if she has any letters or any participants that would have their hand raised.
I will check. I'm going to check with our attendees. I do not see any raised hands with our attendees. And now, Peter, I'll check with our email, and I do not see any comments at this time by email.
Okay. Thank you. So then we'll go ahead and we'll close the public comment. Looking at the list of people here, I don't see that there is anybody out there besides those of us that we know. In any case, with that said, I'm going to bring it back to the panel and we'll have a discussion. So Chris, thank you very much. And I'm going to say, let's start talking about this. I think that we heard about the neighbor issue. If you have any other questions about that, then we'll ask them. Otherwise, we'll assume that everybody has asked the questions of either the architect or the owner that we need to ask, and we'll go forward. Phyllis, any questions, any statement? How do you feel about this?
I find it to be very attractive and a great improvement on the one-story home. I think it's been done with very good taste, and I like the changes that have been done to the first floor exterior. I think it certainly adds to the effect of the home on the neighborhood. The upstairs addition is fine. There's no problem. I think the one was a 1.3 foot variance is not going to make any difference or cause any problem for anybody. It makes sense to do it and have a straight line on that room. So I can certainly make the findings and approve the resolution.
All right. Thank you, Phyllis. Dr. Bundy.
This was, I think, a very challenging project for Chris and David both. It's really an unusual lot, restricted building envelope. Fortunately, the slope of the property and the adjoining properties are such that they really do appear to be very minimally impacted by this. So I congratulate them on putting together a remodel project that's really going to work for Chris and is, I believe, going to enhance the neighborhood. So I can make the findings for the project and approve the variances.
All right. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. Margaret, your thoughts about this?
I'm having gone over there and sort of went up and down that hill. I'm kind of torn because I think it's a very big addition and it'll make a big house for a neighborhood that kind of looks crowded to me. And also because it's so close to the house next door, it just looks crowded in there. And on the other hand, what's there now is very strange, and I think this would be an improvement because it's a nice addition, and I think it adds a lot as far as visually appealing. And I understand the difficulty of that lot, and the variance doesn't bother me. So I'm just kind of curious about what the other commissioners think about how crowded it is there and how big this addition is, there are other two-story houses on that street, but most of them are one-story houses right now, anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what everybody else thinks.
Thank you. I will just say, it looks like there was a two-story addition, 2 or 3 doors down at some point.
Yeah, there were some 2 stories, but most of the houses are one on that street.
Right. Okay, Mr. Rizzo, your thoughts and comments, please.
Well, I want to, just commend them on actually finding something that kind of worked in that setback that they were working on there. It definitely was a very difficult lot driving around there, looking at the slope of the backyard of the neighbors. I actually feel like the addition looked smaller with the story poles than it did in the renderings. I got a little concerned with the views from, I thought that you might have gotten a little bit of a negative support maybe from one of the neighbors up the hill, just because it was, it was definitely blocking their view, but I couldn't get on their property. Maybe if I would have gotten 5 feet above it, it wouldn't have been that much of an impact. I just couldn't really see from the middle of the street. I do have a few concerns on some of the and some of the design approaches that didn't happen, that were in the findings, like breaking up that wall. I know that the applicant is kind of claiming that it's going to be a financial burden, but the amount of work that's going on in this house, there's going to be nothing left. They're in the WUI zone. They're probably going to have to reside the house, as well as all new windows. I just wonder if it's a drop in the bucket to actually, set that wall back and kind of address a few of the design concerns, which would be breaking up that wall plane and not having to deal with a variance. I do have a question regarding, since it's a non-conforming house, the whole house is really a variance. Would they have to go for a variance if they were to put an addition on top of a non-conforming house, Peter?
That's a question for Phil, who's listening in here. So
Phil?
if they do nothing to encroach into the setback, and I think we had this on another project where we had to approve the non-conforming use. Is that what would happen here?
No, I mean, my experience is there are many homes in town and a number of jurisdictions I've worked for where you have existing non-conforming buildings. And those have been, we research it and we find out, it was built pre the code, or it was built, the code was different. And so if you have an existing non-conforming building and you're adding on to that building and your addition is making that non-conformity worse, then you need to get a variance. If your addition has no impact whatsoever on the non-conformity, then a variance is not required. So that's the way I interpret our code, and I believe Adam does, and we have in the past with other projects. So yeah, that's not necessary to, just because the old house is non-conforming doesn't mean you have to go back retroactively and have them get a variance.
Okay, that explains it. And then just to address the windows, the width of the windows don't bother me. The sill height is pretty low. It's about 3 feet, I believe, and that can be confirmed by the architect. So, there is an opportunity to stand right next to that window and kind of look down. Perhaps raising that window sill, you still get the view, the width of the view just slightly might help out a little bit with the privacy. But overall, I mean, if you've got a view of Mount Tam, you want it. If it's not affecting the privacy of your neighbors.
Yeah.
And that's about it. It's definitely a difficult lot, and I was actually pleased to see that the massing wasn't as massive as I thought it was going to be from the renderings, to be honest with you. But unfortunately, the only place to put this addition is right next to the neighbor. You've got all this open space on the rest of the lot, and the only place that you could really build this is right there. I would have personally liked to see them kind of work with that wall plane to not have the variance myself, because they really maxed out this FAR, and I'm still a little bit unclear on that soffit reduction. I'll have to review the code with Phil at some point. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. But that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I agree with you that it might appear that the western side of this is there. I specifically stuck my head down that alley right there between the two, and there is nothing there that would be particularly impacted by those windows. They'd have to stick their heads out the window, I think, and look down. And even then, there wasn't anything that I could see of the neighbor house to the west that would be impacted. But that was my look at it. He's representing that there isn't any view impact. From my perspective, I was very worried about the neighbor across at 623. And if he is representing it correctly, then they don't have a problem with it. That's an old house, as is the small greenhouse at, I think it would be 621 is a very small house that someday will be built up into a two-story and then look out over everything. So that was my concern. Other than that, I really felt that they did a very reasonable job of fitting this into a postage stamp corner on the lot. I think that the variance is kind of acceptable because it's right over the existing structure, and that I think it's a reasonable allowance to let them have that variance for just that small sliver of the building so that they don't incur a cost or even the effort. So I appreciate your comment about that variance. We have found in the past that these kinds of things that are simply trying to fit over an existing sliver like that are generally okay, but not always. I think that from my perspective, if they had to ask for a variance because of all new square footage, I would hesitate as you are about that. I think that as it stands, despite the view impedance of 623, I would make for the findings at this point. Margaret, do you have anything you want to contribute after hearing the two of us talk about it?
No, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
I can make findings, put it that way.
All right, so we would then, if there's nothing else that we want to take on about this, I would ask for a motion on this resolution.
Peter, I'm quickly going to swap between Phil and Adam, so Adam is present for the vote.
Okay.
One moment.
Who will make a motion for this design review application 2019-0106 and the variance application 2019-0107?
I can do that. In the matter of design review application PL 2019-0106 and variance application PL 2019-0107 for a 935 square foot second level addition to an existing single-story home and a variance for a portion of the second floor addition to encroach 1 feet 3 inches into the side yard setback at 626 Oakdale Avenue.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Wolf.
All right, Commissioner Rizzo.
I'm gonna, my inclination is to say I'd like to approve the project if they set it back. So I don't want to, I'm gonna vote no on the variant.
Okay.
Do we have to
Commissioner-
split that, Peter?
I'm sorry, what?
Do we have to split that into two motions?
Well, sorry, I would just say it's currently written as one resolution. Is that correct, Phil?
Yes, it is. Yes, one resolution
Okay.
So,
containing both entitlements, the variance and the design review.
so I think actually it would be just a no, given that the fact that the, and Commissioner Rizzo, please elaborate, but if the variance findings cannot be made, you would be making essentially recommending a no vote or making a no vote on the resolution before you this evening, unless amended to have no variance. So the application before you would be the no. I would.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of mentioned that when I was onboarding. I feel like it. I like the design. I wish it was set back. Could we do it with a condition that it was set back for me to say yes? Or, I mean, it sounds like there might be a majority
Yeah.
anyway.
I
So,
think we have the votes to carry it, yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Peter?
I think, go ahead, Commissioner Metcalf, maybe you're offering some advice.
Okay. When someone votes no on a resolution like this, they have the right to have a sentence added after the vote explaining why. And I think that would take care of Mr. Rizzo's problem with it. Since it is one resolution, it is not being split. You have to vote the same way on the whole thing, and then he could say the reason for my no vote is, and do it within one or two sentences, not a paragraph or a long speech.
Yes, no, I think that's a great recommendation. Thanks, Phyllis. Okay, so
That's
I'll
how
move.
it works under code.
Okay, so we'll move on from the no vote from Commissioner Rizzo. Commissioner Bendel,
Yes.
Commissioner Bundy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Metcalf,
Yes.
and Chairman Chase.
Yes.
And if you want to repeat just in a sentence or two, Jim, just the reasons for the no vote, you don't have to. I think you explained some already, but if you want to, you can elaborate at this time.
sure. No vote on the variance, a yes vote on the design, if the variance did not include, encroaching in on the side yard setback there.
Okay.
Peter, just so you understand, under the Brown Act, the official minutes of the meeting, it would have Jim's comment after the vote is taken.
Okay.
That would be how it works under the Brown Act. So he has to say, I voted no on it because I could not support the variance. Would probably be the easiest way to put it.
Okay.
After the vote, after you vote. Okay.
Helpful to have that clarification. Thank you, Phyllis.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good.
Okay, so the motion does pass to approve the project 4-1.
All right then. So, Mr. Hitzmeyer and Mr. Grabham, good luck with your next step in this project.
Yeah, and I do want Phil to read the appeal rights too as well. So.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Do I need to say what I need to say now that the vote's been done? Phyllis?
It's recorded. I think it's sufficient.
Yeah, I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Phil?
And I will read the appeal rights. Appeal, any action taken by the planning commission at a public hearing can be appealed. And the decision of the planning commission needs to be appealed within 10 calendar days. Appeal papers and forms can be obtained at the planning department, and the fee is $500.
I think it's $300.
I'm sorry, 300. I could
I think somebody here knows that too. Yes. So.
Do we need
Right.
the money?
Yeah, right. Okay.
Everything has gone up.
It's a COVID fee, right? All right, at this point, we move on to the routine and other matters. Does anyone have a report from the last town council meeting or commissioner reports? I don't know who was supposed to cover the last meeting.
I may have been supposed to cover it. I was unable to get on, go to meeting at the time, and it isn't in the video archives yet.
Okay, I can report on some of it if that's helpful.
Please.
I think the one thing that is most relevant is that the town council decided on to adopt the second ordinance related to accessory dwelling units, which specifically applied to Christmas Tree Hill and how interior accessory dwelling units would be counted towards the capacity limitations on Christmas Tree Hill. So the council voted to include interior dwelling units toward the capacity limitations in Christmas Tree Hill. And so that was adopted. It will become effective in 30 days. And in the meantime, staff will be sending that ordinance to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, which we're required to do. And they will review it for compliance with state law. But for the meantime, that's where we are, and that was approved. I'm trying to remember what else did we cover? I think there was an item on Skunk Hollow Park that was also approved. It was, I believe, the design and some budget amendments. I see Commissioner Bendel shaking.
Yeah.
Maybe you have more information. You want to fill in on that?
No, it kind of a boring meeting.
All right.
But I listened to it and I think it was just what you mentioned.
Okay. And I think Todd is doing, he's continuing to provide updates regarding not only sort of the things that the town is doing in response to COVID-19 and the coronavirus. I will mention, which I thought was very impressive, was that an effort undertaken with Lorena Barrera and some other staff, but mostly led by her, to put together a small business grant.
Yeah.
For the small business.
$1,000. Yeah.
$1,000 grants, and they're starting a second round, and the town council approved basically up to $200,000 for that purpose. So I think that was, an impressive effort and well received by the council, and I think others who have, I think they already had like 79 or 113 applicants. I can't remember the exact number, but a lot of small businesses applied for it and received already some of them. And so Todd's giving reports on what the town is doing in response, and then also giving sort of the financial picture as well as part of his regular town manager reports. So if you're interested in those things, I think it's worthwhile listening to his reports during the council meetings. On that front, if we move into, my report. Oh, go ahead, Phyllis.
Yeah, under commissioner's part of requests and stuff, I just wanted to let everybody know I haven't finished preparing it yet, but following our rules and procedures under, I think it's item 4. Anyway, it's under item 4. I'm not sure 4 point what. I am going to request an item be put on the agenda having to do with exterior lighting due to a question by resident in town about a problem with lighting, it's become very obvious we seem to be working under three different sets of rules. One for commercial, nothing really in writing in the ordinances having to do with residential, but as we passed, just as we did tonight, are doing a remodel or new residence being built, we put certain restrictions on it. So I think it would be nice if we had a discussion. I will prepare the back material as expected, under the rules, and give it to Adam, and I'll distribute the rest of you, I guess, through email. When I send it to Adam, I'll copy everybody else. So Adam, you could put it on the agenda, I guess, within a month or whatever it says in the rules and regs. So we can at least discuss it and then start working our way forward to maybe coming up with an ordinance that will cover exterior lighting, since this is becoming an issue. It's not just one person who has complained.
Okay. Thank you, Phyllis. That's good.
Okay.
Go ahead, Adam. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No. In any case, I think I don't really have more to report on my end. There's been a lot of activity just I'm on a couple of Marin Recovers groups, so related to construction and outdoor dining and things like that. So that's been it's been a good experience, trying to get people from industry and across the county to sort of provide input to the Marin Health Officer in terms of whether any modifications or how to reopen or best practices, things like that, are being funneled now to the health officer with some input on a sort of a bi-weekly basis. It appears that's going to be the process. So other than that, we're back up, and construction is, as you know, now permitted throughout town, provided that there are job site safety protocols that are in place, and we are having applicants and people doing construction acknowledge those requirements, provide us with signed acknowledgement forms. But really, this is a self-enforcing thing that needs to be done. There's just not the capacity on our end to be inspecting every project for that. We are requiring that, prior to inspections, those site safety protocols are in place, and our inspector is authorized to just pack it up and move back and come back to the office, or if they're not, he doesn't feel that it's safe there, or they're not following pretty obvious things out of the construction site. So just a heads up on what's going around. It's actually been in effect for since May 4th, and we've had it's been going pretty well, I will say. I was out at two sites. I was out at Amy's last week or the week before, and they had it pretty dialed in over there. They had one person who happened to be basically the owner of the construction company's son, is dedicated solely to that position of check-ins, and had the authority to sort of shut down the site if need be. But they had a very good log of every visitor to the site, and both time in and out, so on and so forth. And just a note on Amy's, they said at the time, this was a week and they were like 6 to 8 weeks out to completion. So obviously that's, we're hoping that they can meet that target, which now is probably 4 to 6 weeks. So, or so 6 weeks, maybe closer to 6 weeks. So I was there, and then I was also at a smaller residential construction site at 38 Lakeside. So, which also they had the hand washing stations, they had check in and check out. So anyways, it's going pretty smoothly. We haven't had a lot of complaints on that. As for the next meeting, just so you know, we have a little bit of a schedule. Well, it's a major schedule change, given that we're not intending to have the next meeting 2 weeks from tonight. So we are looking at a meeting Thursday, June 11th, and I think Tracy had sent a email out. I think some have responded. I'm not sure if everyone has responded, but if you haven't, please respond to Tracy and make sure that you are available. In fact, you can let me know now. It would be Thursday, June 11th at 7 p.m. Thumbs up, everyone. All right. Good. That's great. That's great. So we currently have one item for that meeting, which is another design review item. And then I will just say we're hoping at the June 23rd meeting, we're still targeting that date for coming back on the town hall project with responses to the comments that we received at the last meeting. So just give you a little preview of what's ahead. And I think there is another item that same night on June 23rd we're planning on, which would be a design review for a house remodel on Birch, I believe. That's all I really have. I know it's getting kind of late here, so with that, I'll end my report.
All good stuff, Adam. Thank you very much. Is that 17 Tradewinds going to run amok of Bob over there? Are you going to be able to attend?
Yes.
Okay. You're outside the 300-foot radius. Okay. Great. All right. So with that said, we have meeting notes to approve. Does anybody have any changes or additions to the meeting notes?
I had one change. When we were discussing the egress to the town hall parking lot, I had a question about the drive through the fire department, and that should have said Hixley exit rather than Tamalpais.
Oh, I wondered about that. Okay.
Great. Great. And just a note on that, I mentioned the June 23rd meeting. Our approach, just real quickly, is to directly talk about have a summary of all the comments that we received, and then respond to those comments with Ron's sort of modifications to the project, sort of going directly down a list of comments received, and here's the response, and then putting it all together into a full picture at the end of that of what the full project will look like. So anyways, if you have any questions on that, let me know.
Okay. All right. Well,
all right.
Presumably then Tracy has taken note of that, of Bob's changes to the meeting notes. So we have to pass the meeting notes with that addendum to the notes. So we can do that with a voice vote, Adam.
Yeah, why don't we say all in favor? Why don't you say all in favor of approving those minutes, and we'll do a voice vote.
Okay, so all in favor of approving the meeting notes with Bob Bundy's changes to his comments regarding fire exit, please say aye.
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 Okay, and Jim, maybe you would be abstaining on that one.
Yeah.
Right.
Got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Rizzo would abstain from that, so it would be a 4-aye vote for that. So
great.
Thank you. All right then, I'm going to say let's adjourn this meeting, and thank you all for contributing and being a part of this exercise. I appreciate it, and the town appreciates it.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you, Peter.
And everyone. And Tracy.
Oh, yes.
Especially Tracy.
Always, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, all. Have a good evening.
Stay safe.